One of the critical things that I think every citizen faces when they really look at themselves and look at the problems that the world faces is that they recognise that they can't do much by themselves. And I think the challenge for all of us is to build and develop what I call enterprising skills, and many other people have used that term too. And it's the skills to recognise opportunities, it's the skills to bring people together, it's the skills to search for solutions around the world, it's the skills to find resources that are not being well utilised and to reuse them in good ways. Those are the kind of skills that I'm encouraging people to learn and develop if we're to live for the next century and to see the world survive and prosper. I believe that New Zealand, like Australia and the rest of the world, is facing some really major challenges. Not only global warming, but issues like the poverty divide in the world, the whole range of violence and war issues that are going on in the world make it increasingly important that communities start to take ownership of these problems and start to think freshly about new solutions. And really what I'm hoping people will take out of these couple of days is, one, some conviction that every citizen has to be a change maker if we're going to do something really constructive about the problems we face, and secondly, that we can actually make a change if we work together. And collaboration and the tools of social enterprise and community economic development are really at the heart of that problem solution, in my view. And I'm hoping people will come away inspired to act and inspired to work at their community level, but also at a global level about solving social problems. That's really the issue that keeps me awake at night.
Well, it seems to me that the world's in a tough place at the moment. We've got natural disasters, we've got man-made disasters looming over us. Communism didn't work for us, capitalism is failing us, we need a new way. And I firmly believe that new way is the social economy. We had our first CED conference last year, about just over a year ago now, and that was an amazing coming together of people. We were just really surprised at the demand and the appetite for these conversations. So that conference went off like a bomb, really. It was fantastic, and there was such demand, we decided we better do another one. So this is it, CED Conference 2011. It's many of the same people who were here last year, but plus a whole lot of people this year. The program is much deeper. We've got a lot more Māori content. We've got more private sector people in the room. We've probably got more local and central government people in the room. But the core of this movement is community people at the grassroots who are working for the greater good, for the benefit of our communities. Our problem is that the pool of grant funding is diminishing, government funding, philanthropic funding, so we got to find innovative and enterprising ways to fund the work that we do. For the community people here, I think the conversations are deepening. We're getting a shared language around this work. We're finding out how to do it. We're finding out what some of the pitfalls are. So as practitioners in social enterprise, we're learning a lot, and I think people are going to go away from here and go out and just make it rock in their communities. For government people here, I think they're hearing from us what it is we need from government, and we'll be clearer about that once we've collated some of the feedback after the conference. So we're going to be able to go back to government and say these are legislative changes that are needed to support this movement. This is where the investment needs to be to support this movement, and it's the same for local councils. They have a slightly different role, but you know, how can you make your procurement policies work so that you really value the work that's done by social enterprises and not-for-profits? So there's going to be a lot of those conversations post-conference. Exciting new development though is having some private sector people in the room. Westpac in particular are starting to really get this stuff and wanting to partner us in it. So it's exciting, yeah. But things are changing fast, the ground is shifting, new partnerships are becoming available to us, and with my optimistic hat on, the future's starting to look a little rosier.
This is just an amazing group of people who are thinking about these issues from different angles, and one of the great benefits is getting together and networking and actually realising how many skills there are in the community sector and the great need for us to be using those skills and being active citizens, and not relying on them, with the money to help make our projects happen. Because in the end, it's very obvious that community strength and resilience is what makes a healthy society. This conference has really come at a very good time. There is a whole groundswell happening of people who have been doing great things in the community for years and years, and realising that we have to take the next step and start organising it ourselves. I'm involved in a number of projects that I'm learning huge skills here, ways of organising things, community shares, communities putting money in themselves to get good projects happening, and the whole kind of ownership and doing it for ourselves. Yeah.
If you could tell me a little bit about your context.
Okay. So I've been part of initiating and developing Earthsong Eco Neighbourhood out in Ranui, which is a 32-house community. We've developed that by ourselves with consensus decision making and financing it ourselves as well. So now that village is completed, we're looking at the wider neighbourhood and seeing, how can we help to empower our local suburb to become a really healthy, sustainable, buzzing neighbourhood where people feel that they belong and they have an ownership of it. And that's really important because, Ranui in particular has been seen as quite a depressed, low-income neighbourhood, but there's just amazing people there, there's amazing spirit, there's a huge range of skills that aren't being recognised, and I think it's a win-win-win. You help people to connect with each other, to feel that, we are creating our own kind of flourishing, sustainable life. And how can we do that? By connecting, by using some of these skills that have been developed in the UK over a lot longer, and create a wonderful place.
It's absolutely essential that people come to a conference like this. Firstly, where networking can take place. It's not a case of what you know, it's more a case of who you know. The discussions and the networking that goes on here is going to benefit individual communities right across New Zealand. One of the things that we're involved in very much and interested in is small, sustainable business. It's obvious that government money and government funding is drying up, and so it's necessary for people to become sustainable, for groups to become sustainable and generate their own income. And an event like this pulls together ideas, it pulls together contacts that are invaluable. This provides the asset for community development to go ahead.
Well, I think, anybody who's not looking at the papers or whatever, and not feeling a little depressed, they don't really understand what's going on, But if you don't actually look at what's also happening with young people and the different networks that are trying to respond to that, well, that just gives you hope at the same time. So that's really working on both feet at the same time. I think we all have to step up to just a whole different layer of citizenship for a start, much more than what is more commonly talked about in our culture. It's got to come from a different place. It's actually a place closer to stewardship than the sort of citizenship that we know about, being a citizen of a country or being a voter in a country. It's actually the citizenship that says, I'm the person who is going to be creating the communities that I want to live in. I'm the person that wants to be steward of the things that need to be looked after and cared for in our community. I'm also the person who is going to be creating the possibilities that our children are going to be inheriting. And so we need more people who can step up to that part of themselves. The thing is, it's in everybody. I think it's actually encoded into our DNA to get on with this particular job. Our job is to help awaken each other up to that particular job to happen. I've been to developing countries and people say that it's 40% unemployment rate, so I go to the slums and see where these people actually are. And these people aren't unemployed. They're all running small businesses. They're all doing. There's a tremendous spirit of creativity in some of the poorest places in the world. People are getting things organised, and that's also going to be happening here. As people find things a little bit more tougher, I've got great faith in the ability of people just to start organising their own way out of it. Part of that organising is to start to understand the nature of economics quite differently, and to take it back to communities rather than say, well, this is something that should be sorted out by our Prime Minister or our Minister of Finance or our Mayor or anything like that. We've actually got to take it right back to our neighbourhoods, to our households and into our communities, and that's what a conference like this is really talking about.
I'm a community development worker from way back. I've been involved in community development for about 20 years. And one of the speakers here said that we've got to move from community development to community economic development. I think we need to bring them together. So I guess where I'm coming from is I'm passionate about community development, but I know in order for communities to be sustainable, I need to educate myself about financial matters. I need to almost become an expert in various other areas that are impacting on communities. So I think we need to understand the banking system. We need to understand the business of community organisations and how we can make social enterprises work, for example, from a business perspective, because we're actually experts at the community side, at the social capital side, so we need to bring that in. I also think we need to understand how the broader economy works and how we can sit in the cracks of the broader economy and open up those cracks so that they provide opportunities and possibilities for the sustainability of communities. Interestingly, I think it's an old and a new concept because, for example, I'm very attached to the cooperative movement and the mutual aid movement. That's a very old tradition. And if you look at the history of economics and the history of civil society, it's only very recently that it's been funded by government. And for a long time it was actually funded by people getting together and contributing small amounts of money and using that to create enormous amounts of change. So if we look at the history of some of our civil society organisations, they never were started by government funds. They were started by people who were passionate and who made things happen. And so we're almost coming full circle and rediscovering some of that, putting some new language around it and changing the way that we describe that. But it's fundamentally similar or the same thing. I think the idea of a common language is really important. So it's great. I was here last year, and to see the way that the common language is coalescing and developing, to have conversations across the sector. So it's fantastic to have lots of people from the community sector and from social enterprises, but also from government and from corporations, and to start to have those discussions all together about how we can coalesce the movement, because effectively I think that's what we need. We need a movement of people who are passionate about the sustainability of communities.
What brings me here is that Lindsay Jeffs, one of the organisers, phoned me up in February and asked me would I come to the conference and to share the social economy experience of my hometown. And my reason for coming is that Lindsay visited my city over 15 years ago. They came as part of an international group of people who were interested in community development and also in people-centred development. But the purpose they came was to actually assist us during our peace process and to help us actually move from violence into a democratic, peaceful solution. And we also had an international conference some 15 years ago, and the people who came from New Zealand were actually quite inspirational and helped us from a grassroots point of view to build up our peace process. And we have actually gone on, and as a result of that, we now have a peace process. So when Lindsay contacted me, I just could not refuse. Why I'm here, I'm currently involved in social enterprise development in a private neighbourhood in Derry. And I think if people wanted to know what was our journey, how did I get involved in social enterprise, and what was the impact of social enterprise in terms of rebuilding a local economy that was devastated due to a war. And I'm here sharing that particular story. For me, I've shared that story, but I've also, in terms of this particular conference, I've met hundreds of people who, the energy that's actually coming from people who are actually involved in social enterprise and community development here in New Zealand, and the work that they're involved in is about the common good. And if I can share my experience of what's happening in Ireland and also within a UK context to help the people here to establish a social economy policy and network that will actually ensure that we create a mixed and balanced economy. For example, in Christchurch, which has been devastated, I would actually argue that if that particular city is to be regenerated and a renewal process takes place, then the citizens have to be involved in that process. The citizens have to be given ownership of that particular process, and the citizens also have a role to play in terms of rebuilding it and in terms of community economic development activity. I would actually argue that those who are involved in community development and also in community economic development, what we're talking about here, I would actually argue that they have been the catalyst that's actually helped rebuild our economy. It's also been a catalyst that's actually brought the two communities together, because what actually unites the two communities is the fact is that because we were involved in a 40-year war, is that the fact that there was disinvestment, there's high levels of unemployment in both communities, and the vehicle to bring them together was this process of the social economy. We're rebuilding our particular communities. We're involved in peace building, we're involved in reconciliation work, and as a result of that grassroots bottom-up approach, and actually in fact we have moved our politicians forward. We have now actually starting to rebuild our economies and that sort of situation. So it's been quite enormous in terms of how the city where I come from, Derry, has been transformed over the last 15 years. I think the people who have attended this particular conference will be the innovators for the future. I think that they will actually lead this particular conference. I think they'll go back into their own neighbourhoods, towns and locations, and they will see actually the benefits of obviously social enterprise and the importance of social enterprise in terms of building a mixed and balanced economy right across New Zealand. I also think it will actually give them the tools to actually talk about the importance of active citizenship and involving people in local decision making, and on top of that, with the fact that they've also got a major economic contribution to make to the economic welfare of their local communities.
The Community Economic Development Conference is the second year of it, and last year I was also the MC, but I've been really working in the Auckland Council on community economic development with Community Waitakere, and so when the opportunity came up to actually be the MC, I'm really glad. It gives me the opportunity not only to meet the speakers and to have some good conversations, but also it gives me a chance to really help shape the direction and the energy. And I mean, it's been fantastic energy. It's a very easy conference to run because we have fantastic people attending. They're all activists, they're all incredibly energised and I think informed people. And really what we're doing here is giving them another frame to apply to their work. You know, community economic development, we're bringing two parties together, two families together, you know, the social kind of do-goody type stuff and the financial, the economic world. And generally, the two of them have not wanted to talk to each other. And very difficult for us to bring them together. And I think one of the interesting things that's happened here is really the community people, the social people, are very strongly embracing the kind of economics and finances. And what they're saying is, we've got a role to play and don't ignore us. And I think when we look at Christchurch, where some of the examples there, where central government is busy saying we know the answers, what we're saying here is the community know the answers, and they can play as much a role as the private sector. In fact, they already do. It's just a case of recognition, not a case necessary of generating from a new. And I think one of the big pluses in bringing the international voices over is that they've done a lot of this work before. You know, they've had these debates and these considerations. Our challenge is to contextualise their stuff from the UK, from Australia, and bring it into our environment. And I mean, we had a really good stream of Māori entrepreneurial activity, and we had people who are already doing stuff, people who are doing academic study on it, people from overseas who have come from an Aboriginal background, studied the New Zealand Māori entrepreneurial, gone back, re-looked at Kuri, at the Aboriginal, and now they come back to here to again tell us the stories from an overseas perspective. Fantastic stuff that is unique in the world. New Zealand's approach to its Indigenous entrepreneurs, we have such huge opportunity, and certainly our overseas speakers incredibly value what they hear from us here. What's the big change that we're looking for? The change that we're looking for is the sector is taken seriously. That another stranded opportunity for funding for community organisations, so they don't get sucked into having to be dependent upon grants from central government and be funder-led. They have an opportunity to be independent, community focused, locally driven. And I think that's one of the hugest opportunities we've got. I think for the sectors, it's a maturing. I think that what we're doing is we are reinventing the language and creating some new concepts and new ways of being by actually bringing some thinking together from different sectors. And I think in the past what we used to do is say, oh, let's take some of the private sector learnings and apply them to the community sector. What we're doing here is actually saying, what is it about both of them that can work together? And that's going back to our fundamentals. And I think that it's going to be a new way of civil society, where actually we're not so fixated on our silos of, oh, this is private and this is community, and community has to operate on charity. No, we're operating in a whole different paradigm. We're giving it more maturity, we're giving it more complexity, and as a consequence we actually have to create new words to describe what we mean so that we can have the good conversations. When we're pushing the edges, we might be going into some areas. We talked today about overloading debt. You know, the opportunity for debt. Some organisations have got into really bad situations because the opportunity for debt to make them grow, but actually have got themselves into a precarious position where they fall over. We've got some language here now that we can debate that debt equity conversations for small organisations, and that's fantastic. So we've had here a variety of community organisations from around the country, small, some that are already doing social enterprise work. We've had people from the corporate sector, particularly from the Westpac Bank, who are really interested in this here, both here in Australia. We've had overseas experts, people who've worked at the community coalface in Derry, people working in some of the toughest places in the UK. In Australia, people who are social researchers. And one of the things I think I'm hoping that almost all of them take away is the inspiration of what's possible. That actually we don't have to continue operating in old paradigms. We can create a different future where local people have a say in their local economies and they make a difference for their own prosperity. That's what I hope that we've taken away.
Well, I'm here so as a delegate because with a real passion for social enterprise and the impact the positive impact that can have on communities, and also looking at the prevention and rehabilitation, if you like, of joblessness and homelessness. Fantastic way for communities to get involved. I think also busting out of that grant dependency and busting out of a beneficiary mode of thinking is just incredibly valuable. So I think in terms of the kaupapa or philosophy of this conference, that's superb. Also as a presenter, so talking about the different relationships and how relationships have changed between business, between community, government, education, and just looking at those different dynamics and how those are sort of adding value and actually driving the changes that are occurring for social enterprise and community. As Manager of Community Engagement for Westpac, I'm here because this is a really important thing for the bank to be part of. We have a strategic imperative called the local operating model, which is about more branches, local decision making, and each of our bank managers in those communities is actively tasked with being actively engaged with their community. And so that's about societal health, environmental health, and economic health. So really looking at the well-being of the whole of a community, however that community chooses to define itself. So from a Westpac point of view and the community engagement point of view, this conference is probably the key event on the not-for-profit and in fact the community enterprise, community development agenda for this year. So we're really thrilled to be here and to be participating. So the presentation that we gave, we were really, really lucky to have Westpac's Head of Group Sustainability. So he's the top dog for Westpac Group's sustainability. So Graham flew in from Australia to participate in the conference. And he talked about what Westpac's doing in Australia with social enterprise, the funding, the support, the employee volunteering, all of the things that are going on with that. So part of our presentation, so I was actually sitting in the scene looking at the different relationships and how Westpac frames up its approach to community engagement and the sort of relationships we want between the sectors and with the sectors. So I hope that in terms of what people take away from our presentation is that we're no longer the enemy and that business isn't bad, that actually we've got value in terms of social planning, social development, community development, and that we're there as a partner rather than just a funder or even just as a bank, like a loan shark, that we're there, we're more than just the business and products that we have. We're a community of 5,000 people that wants to engage with the communities of New Zealand. Absolutely it's a positive thing because it's talking about a transfer of skills and knowledge and philosophies, if you like, between the different sectors. We're moving away from the civil society, business, community, government, traditional siloed relationships to ones of jigsaws. We're actually wanting to work together, and adding value is about mutual benefit and reciprocity, which is that's a really very different thing. So it's no longer the benefactor-beneficiary stuff. It's about partnership. It's about pooling our common resources and skills to deal with common issues. I think the other thing is we're moving away from purely a philanthropic or a social, so the business will pay so that community can deliver on either an environmental or a social issue. It's actually, well, the community can add value to the economic mix of that as well. Because if the economy is shot in a community, it's really hard to exist as a good community. In the same way, if the community is shot, it's really hard to do business. So I think that the growing awareness and willingness to engage with each other and to stop thinking about sectors, and apparently this is how an organisation in this sector should behave. It's about saying, well, this is who we are, this is how we behave, this is what we're out to achieve, and in order for us to achieve what we need to achieve, we need to work with you, and actually come together for common ends. And we know that as part of that relationship, it's a value add for everybody involved. So it's not just we're going to deliver the solution and you're going to give us all of your resources. It's actually we're going to participate in this together. Probably the key learning and the thing that's come up time after time from all of the different presenters from each, whether they're from Scotland or England or Australia, is that we can't do this alone. So business can't survive only on business, community can't survive only with community, government can't survive only with government. We have actively got to seek ways to work more closely together and in ways which are mutually beneficial. So I hope that people take that away with them. I also hope that they take away with them the notion of operating as a business and that they see business as a resource to help them with what business is very good at. Most businesses are very good at in terms of running a business. There are some disciplines and some professional sort of attitudes and skills and tools that can be transferred across. In the same way that for those community organisations and social enterprises with their values set, how they manage people, how they work with people, what they're set out to do, that they're values driven, they're mission driven, is that they can pass that back to business and they can actually add value and help business be a better business in the same way that business can help community and social enterprise be better at what they do.
I'm here because I was invited. I'm following the footsteps of my colleague Anne-Marie Naylor, who came to address the conference last year. I come from a network of community enterprises in the UK, and we believe passionately that we must learn from wherever is possible, but also that we should share what we've learned in the UK. In terms of the UK, obviously it's a bigger place, so there's more going on. I think in some senses I come from an organisation that's just merged so two networks have merged together. The first network stems back from the 1920s, so there is a long tradition to build on in the UK. Also the policy context, the adversity and the public sector cuts are driving communities to think about how they can help themselves. I think there's a mass going on across the range. I'm particularly interested in developments in poor neighbourhoods. We're seeing more and more long-term organisations building their balance sheets through asset transfer and through disuse of social finance so that they're resilient and can be there for the long term. Change is only going to ever be slow in poor communities, and therefore we need resilient organisations that are not dependent on grant finance, which inevitably always keeps them short of money, taking control of their own destiny, and increasingly beginning to deliver local public services, which they have the reach and the high-touch contact with their client group in order to make more effective. One of the mantras in the UK at the moment is, how do we do more for less? How do we transform service delivery by engaging the clients in designing and delivering their own services? And social enterprise is at the forefront of that debate. Often some of the best things are born out of adversity, so in a difficult time, although clearly one's not looking for it, there is opportunity. Specifically, I think there is probably a maturity to the social enterprise sector, the way we network, the way we interact with government and business, that perhaps is a little bit further advanced, or anyway different from New Zealand, and so maybe there's some specific lessons there. Involving government is particularly important. I think that the pitch to government needs to be about the costs of doing nothing, particularly in poor communities, and switching some of the government spend, which is always counter-cyclical. Government spend tends to go up in the poor times. So switching some of that to preventative investment. We all know that services like youth work are vulnerable in terms of downturn. Keeping somebody in jail in the UK costs £50,000 a year. It'd be cheaper to send them to Eton.